midlife crisis is often the stuff of jokes and stereotypes, but really it is no laughing matter. Clinical psychologist Gail Feldman is here to speak about her personal journey that she has shared in her book entitled Midlife Crash Course, The Journey from Crisis to Full Creative Power. I love that. I love it. I love it. Welcome. It's so nice to have you.
It's great to be here, Nikki.
Well, I kind of feel like I know you now that I've read the book because I know so much about your history, but I really want you to share, before we talk about your personal, your personal background, I want to talk a little bit about what is the new midlife, because that really struck me in this book.
Yeah. Well, in our parents' generation, midlife was thought to be a decade in your 50s. Now, because we're living so much longer, we get 30 years of midlife. We get our 40s, our 50s, our 60s. And few of us are prepared to handle the challenges that come up during that time.
Right.
You know, challenges like chronic illness, injury, financial loss, loneliness, death.
Absolutely. I mean, I even marked that page when you wrote that because that was something that really spoke to me, because I think about my parents, and midlife, as you said, you normally would have thought 50s, but now 60s, and if you've got parents to take care of, you've got children to take care of, I mean, there's so much more to being in your midlife now because of the longer stretch of time.
Right. Many millions of people are finding themselves caring for 4 different generations. They are caring for parents, for children, for grandchildren, and often a partner. My sister's in this experience right now with our mother's 97.
Wow, God bless her. That's amazing.
And she's getting quite fragile now, and then she has grown-up children, grandchildren she's caring for in some way, and her husband having a terminal illness.
Oh my gosh, it's so much, and it's you have to find ways to prioritize, because family is still family, whether it's a parent or a child or a husband.
Right.
And obviously, as I said, you speak from experience. So let's talk a little bit about what led you to writing this book.
Okay, great. As I was moving through my own midlife crashes, which involved a divorce, accidents.
After 35 years.
After 35 years. Accidents with broken bones, a head injury, and a broken heart. I began meeting many other women who were struggling with the same kinds of situations.
Right.
And so I created a women's group. We called ourselves Mighty Women Unite.
I love it.
And I began doing workshops with women where we would support one another and create ways of developing resilience through this time.
That's what you need.
That's the key.
It's the strength and the power, and finding a way to turn something that could potentially take your life on a downhill spiral and bring it uphill. And I think that's really exactly what you did with this book. And I want to talk a little bit about the heroine's journey, because that's a big part of this book. So let's talk about that context a little bit.
Yeah. I love bringing that in because it elevates us from that place of, oh my, I'm having such a hard time, I must be defective, or
something must be wrong with me.
Yes, yes, and it puts it in the landscape of the greatest adventure of your lifetime.
I love it.
Which it is.
Looking at life as an adventure is such a great way to see it.
Yeah, and I like referring to the term hero because the word comes from Greek mythology. And it comes from Hera, and Hera was the Greek goddess who was married to Zeus. So in that term,
I didn't realize that.
we have an integration of both the masculine and the feminine concepts, which is what we're going for at this stage, because that's what brings us full power.
It's so great. It's such a great message. And I think we think of professionals as already knowing about their field, right? When we talk about everybody in their own profession, but your profession is psychology, and now also author. So talk a little bit about what you learned professionally, because I think that helps other people with their journeys, is what you learned by putting 2 professions really together.
Right. I think it has to do with remaining curious and how healthy it is to be curious when you're dealing with things. So, as I mentioned, I had a head injury, which was a real challenge.
Sure.
And I learned a lot about head injuries and the fact that, TBIs, they call them, traumatic brain injuries, will affect 2.7 million Americans in the coming year.
Scary.
So, and I learned about the heart because I had some heart complications going on.
And a broken heart, mind you.
Yeah, and this is really cool. I learned in reading a study from Johns Hopkins that there is such a thing as stress cardiomyopathy.
What does that mean?
Or broken heart syndrome.
Really?
Yeah.
It's an actual term in the medical profession?
It affects mostly women.
Okay.
But they can end up with serious incidents involving the heart because of the stress. So they call it broken heart syndrome.
Well, as you talk through the book, one of the things I felt was, it was kind of sharing an experience. But then you get to chapter 11, which I noted it's actually called Supremely Supportive Self-Care for the Journey. This, to me, is kind of the help section. This is kind of the solution section.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about that real quickly, because if you do pick up this book, I think there's something really relevant and important about this chapter in particular.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. And just putting it in the context again of the hero's journey, we're talking about life and death issues. And metaphorically, what has to happen is the death of the ego, the death of that defensive part of us, that would keep us resisting life and people and experiences. So in order to cope with all of those things along the way, it really is important that we get to self-care methods. Those are the things we put last on our list.
Yes.
And develop a resilience that supports us through this journey. And I want to mention, there's always supernatural aid along the way.
There is. And you bring that to light in a lot of ways, and the meditations and just the daily things that you can say and do for yourself. That to me is really helpful, and so I recommend when you read this book, really, that chapter to me, it speaks volumes. It really does get you to a place of healing.
I usually support people in reading that chapter first.
Do you really?
My story comes second.
I love it.
Read that.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting, and I want to talk really quickly about the new positive psychology, because I think that's something that a lot of people would want to hear from you.
Yeah. That was another thing I really studied and went to meetings, because this now is the emphasis on personal strength. My field has been criticized for its sort of relentless focus on pathology. What is wrong with me?
Exactly.
And what is wrong with you? And let's, delve into that.
Right.
And while it's important to understand personal dynamics, it's really, really important that we focus on strengths and that we reinforce those strengths.
That's great. I like hearing that, reinforcing, because I think reinforcing your power is really what takes you to another place when you're feeling in that slump, whether midlife or really any time in life.
Yeah, and that's the gold at the end of the rainbow. That's the treasure. The treasure has to do with reinventing yourself.
Okay.
With recreating yourself.
It's great. It's such a great message. I'm so happy you're here to share this, and I want to let everybody know, how can they find this book?
On Amazon.
Okay.
Amazon.
That's easy enough.
The release date is next month, but it is available now on Amazon.
And you can see more information, of course, on a link right here on Casa.com. Midlife Crash Course. Dr. Gail Feldman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's really been a wonderful
me.
pleasure to have you.
Thanks
and
so
you'll want
much.
to stick around for this, because new moms actually have a lot on their plate. Coming up, Jan Laird is cooking up meals that every mother will love.